Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Queen is Dead. You guys might be wondering who this voice is. So, because Dhruv and Sanjeet haven't watched John Wick 4 yet, Amartya and I are going to discuss the film, which is apparently breaking records and has already led the filmmaker to roll back onto his decision and consider the possibility of more sequels.
This hit goes out to you, Mr. Wick.
42 regular, wasn't it?
Yeah. And so it begins.
Yeah. Living in this time behind enemy lines, so I got mine. I hope you
Challenge you to single combat.
If you win, you'll have your freedom.
And when I see you, I'ma take what I want, so
Amen.
So, without further ado, let's get into discussing John Wick. And since Amartya just recently rewatched the first three films before gearing up for the fourth one, let's hear him talk about how his experience was rewatching and revisiting those three films.
When we started, like, you remember when John Wick came out, did you watch it then? Like, you
Yeah,
remember watching it?
2014.
Yeah, so when we had seen John Wick the first time, I think we all were kind of shocked or stunned because if you remember correctly, during that time, action movie as a genre itself was becoming sort of, combined with other genres or becoming a subgenre of separate umbrella type of genres. Like action movie was part of a superhero genre, or action movie was part of a science fiction genre. Core action films were mostly relegated to, the B movies in a way, or the direct to video films of, great martial artists, American martial artists, or British martial artists, like say a Scott Atkins movie or a Michael J. White movie, or among the Eastern audiences, we had Donnie Yen Ip Man movies. We had all those movies, but in America, because action movies at that time used to be relegated to say a Taken 3, or all the other stuff which had shaky cam, choppy editing,
Post-Born trilogy, basically.
post-born trilogy, basically. So in that regard, we can understand. And the closest I think we came to an action movie which had more or less a sort of hold on a steady way was the Mission Impossible films, and to a certain extent, I think Bond, because to 2012, Skyfall
Skyfall hit theaters, yeah.
Yeah, Skyfall had released in theaters, and in the Mission Impossible franchise, if I'm not wrong, Ghost Protocol had released 3 years ago.
11, yeah.
Yeah, Ghost Protocol had released in 11, and Rogue Nation is supposed to release next year. So during that time, John Wick comes out. Now, that's the situation we are in. We were in a dry spot because other than that, big budget studio blockbuster movies, which were quintessentially action movies, never usually came out. So when Chad Stahelski and co-director David Leitch comes out with John Wick, the initial perception was this is going to be a direct-to-video movie, right? That was the initial perception. This is going to be a modest direct-to-video movie, which is getting a modest theatrical.
For an actor who's at crossroads in his career, right? In his acting career.
In his acting career itself, because Keanu also was in a dry spell anyway. John Wick basically revitalized his career.
Definitely. Yeah.
And the thing, what gave John Wick such a huge boost up, even in spite of the choppy editing and everything else, because believe it or not, the fact that if we call it a direct-to-video movie, some of that sensibility is still there. But it's like we couldn't ignore the fact that the action sequences were extremely good. Because here's the thing. The problem with any action sequence in an American movie was we need to fucking see those. We need to see punches being thrown. We need to see kicks being blocked. We need to see people moving. We need to see people getting punched. We need to see blood thrown out. We don't need to see the cameras being shaken at every second, or when a punch is thrown, another cut, punch hitting the cheek, another cut. We don't need to see 15 cuts every time. We need to see genuine stunt work.
Without any daggy lighting.
We need to see genuine stunt work. We need to see stunt work done with precision. We need to see good editing. And even if not great editing, at least decent enough editing that you can understand. It's not
Vivid enough for the audience to follow the action at least.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So in that regard, I think John Wick succeeded and John Wick 1 also succeeded because it had a very strong emotional core. This is a guy, when it opens up, this is a guy who had just lost his wife. Pretty relatable loss. So his wife, to understand or to make him not feel alone, this wife gives him a dog. And this kind of becomes his spirit animal in a way. That was the intention. But during one of his routine stoppages in a petrol pump, where he's refueling his car, he comes across a Russian gangster's arrogant son who decides that he wants the car. And when John Wick says that it's not for sale and to very politely say F off, the Russian gangster's son, because he's an arrogant douchebag,
as they often come with Hollywood films.
Yes, as they are often shown at Hollywood films.
Yeah.
Because he's an arrogant douchebag, he decides to conduct a home invasion and get into John Wick's house and
wreak havoc, basically.
Take the car, and in the process, he does a fatal mistake. He kills the dog.
And now we have $1 million franchise.
Yes, and now we have a guy who is just angry. But now this could be the plot of any movie like a Death Wish, a revenge movie, like a Charles Bronson Death Wish movie, or any of these movies. No, but then we learn that no, he's the leader. He's a member of a secret group of assassins. There is literally a world hidden there and everything. And the cool thing about John Wick 1 was that world was built through conversation. The world was in the background. It wasn't.
It was just hinted at, right?
It was just hinted at.
Yeah.
To excite people.
And I mean, the one scene that I vividly remember, and I don't think that I've rewatched the first John Wick film since it came out, which means it's been almost 8 years since I watched it, right? And I still vividly remember that one scene where the security guard or some sub-cop shows up at his place, and he just asks him that, "Oh, how's everything been? You're back to your normal life," or something like that. So it's hinted, right, that
it's hinted that this world is cat bit skewed. This world is a cat bit skewed.
Yeah.
It's already hinted at. But then, as we see John Wick very systematically mowing down each and every obstacle that comes across his path, because that's what they are. All these people were coming to kill him. They're merely obstacles. It's not as if that he's shooting and he's going to miss. The trick is not that he's going to miss. He's not going to miss. The trick is how long can he keep going?
Yeah.
And that's the whole point. That's the point of making a character be so invincible and be so efficient at his job. How long can this guy keep going as you put more and more and more and more stronger enemies, stronger opponents? And that's how John Wick 1 begins. And then we move to John Wick 2, we move to John Wick 3. The problem with John Wick 2 and 3 is now they understood that the world is there, and so they begin to expand on the world. They begin to expand on the continental, the hotel, the
mythology of the lore.
The mythology, more or less, of the hotel and everything. We realize that this world is very different. Sometimes comically so. Like at this point in New York, I think 98% of the population are assassins at this point. It's almost
listening to their own special radio.
Yes. And it's also comically stupid at this point. But we buy into it because the world itself, because we are led to believe, because John Wick 1 was relatively grounded, we are still following this guy. So slowly and steadily, this began as an act of escalation, right? Each and every time, each and every action sequence is built and built and built.
And it's just an excuse to find ways to keep him into this dirty business, right? That he so desperately wanted to get out of and was out of, right, for so long. And yet there was this speck of revenge that brought him into all of this again. And I think this again brings me to this this topic that we discussed earlier off record, that it's supposed to take place, all the events of these 4 John Wick films are supposed to take place, unroll within a week, right?
And weeks. I think weeks, because John Wick 1 happens, that entire event happens. each of these movies flows into one another, right? John Wick 1's final act segues into John Wick 2, which then moves a couple of days later, then a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
John Wick 2 ends with the bounty on his head, and we see that, and when John Wick 3 opens, we see him already running. The bounty is supposed to be taking place within an hour. John Wick 2 ends saying that it's going to come into effect within an hour.
Yeah.
John Wick 3 opens with minutes left within the hour.
Mm-hmm.
So it's already flowing within. And then there is a sequence of him journeying into, the desert and everything else and all that stuff. When he's going to find the location of the marker. And finally, we get into John Wick 4. All of these things, each and every one of them, are supposed to happen within a span of weeks.
Which makes sense, right? Because I think the sequels benefit from relying on the emotional dexterity that the first part laid out because of how clear it had those character motivations and intentions set, right? It was very
Almost
clear.
overwhelmingly so, right?
Exactly.
Because the first movie had such a clear-cut emotional through line that the second and the third movie was basically, it's like a visceral circle in a way. It's a good-looking circle. For action movie aficionados, it's very good-looking circle. But it's still a circle. From an emotional standpoint, it's still a circle with maybe minor progressions into Wick's own psyche. Maybe. That too, maybe. It's more focused on the world itself and on the surrounding people and how many types of assassins, what are the types of villains, what's the hierarchy and everything else, all of that stuff.
And for me, the fourth part comes across as a sweeping circle that is almost 3 hours long. And I know a lot of people had, including the two of us actually, had doubts and concerns about this runtime, which has become like now very regular
I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense, right? Because it's like every time you hear a movie approaching 3 hours, you're obviously going to think like it's like indulgence overload.
Especially, I think especially the suspicions grow harder when it's an action film, right?
Yeah. An action movie is supposed to be, here's the basic beats. An action movie is supposed to be short bursts of short, sweet action. There is a basic story. Here's the problem though. It's like when people hear basic story, they think basic story means weak story. That's not the case though.
Definitely, yeah.
That's not the case. Sometimes simplicity is a virtue. Sometimes simplicity is a virtue. When simplicity becomes a virtue to that extent, the barrier of entry or your judgment should depend on whether an emotional through line is actually being touched on. Because it could be two things, right? Cool action sequences you can watch in a YouTube video also. You can watch Bat Under the Sun ka YouTube videos. You can watch all those stuff. You can watch all those sequences. You will have fun. Each and every action sequence for a person to enjoy needs to have a protagonist who we understand is getting hurt, who we understand is getting tired. And as a protagonist, we are supposed to root for. And John Wick, whether we want to like it or not, John Wick is a character we have been following for the past 3 movies. We know what he is. We know his emotional through line. Sure, it hasn't changed. Sure, it's not going away. But maybe that's the point. And in the final movie, in John Wick Part 4, we realized that this is kind of like an end point. At least it was supposed to be an end point. लेकिन अब इतना पैसा कमा लिया है, क्या ही कर सकते हैं. But that was a through line. So I think in a way, if we are going to say this, I think John Wick Chapter 4 works very well as a
exactly as an end chapter.
As an end chapter,
this story.
Yeah, as a
not this universe, but the story.
Not this universe, but this story.
Yeah. And that's precisely why after this film, my initial thoughts were, does it have to be this long? Of course not. But would I have had any problem with it being an extra hour long? Of course not. Because you see that it's an excuse for the filmmakers who are clearly in awe with various decades of action films, right? Because this film has like homages to films from different decades of different decades, right?
Of course.
Ranging from Lawrence of Arabia to With the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly to all the action films that you can name that's influenced the genre. and it's an excuse to stage these intricately designed and choreographed sequences, action sequences, right? I mean, there's action sequences in this film. Almost all action sequences have a sub-action sequence within it.
It's cascading, right?
Yeah.
Each and every set piece is flowing into the next, then flowing into
Yeah.
the next, then flowing into the next. It's a cascading action
Exactly, yeah.
sequence which are like connected by a chain of events.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is a common criticism that all these movies are designed around action set pieces.
Mm-hmm.
RRR famously is criticized that RRR story is all designed around these action set pieces. I would say that doubly holds for John Wick 4.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
all of these movies, this entire movie is completely designed around its action set pieces, which could be a criticism. I'm very sure
Which makes sense because each act has that huge action set piece that is very confined to just one geographic location.
One
right?
geography.
But
key on the geographic.
exactly,
Yeah.
and it's like, but it works so well because each of those locations, each of those geographic locations are very distinct.
Yeah.
And it's something that you have seen before in action films, but not on this scale. And I don't even have any hesitation in saying that I have not seen any action sequence for example, the stairwell sequence, right? I have never watched anything like that enough.
So here's my thing, right?
Yeah.
A good, well-designed action choreography sequence should be physical storytelling at its finest. That's what it should be. Now, there were criticisms that it's stupid that John Wick is, putting his hand up to stop the bullets from getting in because he's moving his coat up to stop the bullets from getting in. Number one, this is a world. This is a world in which assassins are moving around left and right. That is number one. Number two,
we have to adapt
it. Number two, the verisimilitude of this movie. For people who don't understand, verisimilitude means the reality of the narrative, belief
of the world,
belief in the reality of the world. The reality of the world is all these assassins have Kevlar plated armors weaved into their suits. That's literally what it is. It was shown in the second movie of John Wick. So that's how they are protecting themselves. And then, as we see in each of the action sequences, say in Osaka, say in that glass room, we see a 7-foot tall guy come in. We see Wick using the nunchuck, hitting the other guy. Okay. He's trying to daze them. They're not getting dazed. Then he climbs on top of them. He pushes them down. They're not getting pushed down because these are 7-foot tall bruisers. Then he takes the gun out. He shoots him through the neck. Only then does the guy go down. And before shooting the guy through the neck, he uses the gun. He shoots the other guy on the side, killing him. So the question is, he isn't missing any target. It's not about him missing a target. It's about how he's going to get these guys to go down.
It's literally, by the end, it becomes a race against time, right?
A race against time. For some people, they might say that it's a video game, more or less. Okay, it is a video game. It's a damn good-looking video game. I'm sorry to say. It is a damn good-looking video game. On the flip side, we have Donnie Yen, the great Donnie Yen. Donnie Yen playing a blind assassin named Kane.
Standout.
Yeah. He steals the movie. Now, for people who don't know this, the trope of the blind swordsman or the blind assassin or the blind samurai is a trope that has been going on since the 60s. There is a series of movies in Japan called the Zatoichi movies. There are 28 Zatoichi movies. Okay? 28 Zatoichi movies and one reboot. So there are 29 movies, Zatoichi movies. The Zatoichi movies follow a blind swordsman named Zatoichi, played by Shintaro Katsu. This is a guy who is more or less a plump-looking dude, very unthreatening. Okay. that was his whole point. Like he used to be a masseuse. This is taking place during the Edo period of Japan. Okay, so it's like during the Chanbara phase of movies, samurai movies, which we are used to seeing. This is during that time. So we are watching this guy who is supposed to be a masseuse go around in every town, small town, and he gets involved in the local gang war. Each and every single movie, there is always a local gang war. The plot is always extremely convoluted.
Yeah.
There is no sense in the plot, and nobody cares also. Okay. There is, of course, always a scene in which, Zatoichi is masusing somebody. There is a card game. He's also a very cool gambler, so he's very good at, gambling. He's very good at understanding how cards work, which Donnie Yen's character also does. Yeah. So that's how he understands. He's very good with dice. But, and the cool thing is, he's a master swordsman who knows exactly how, where, and how the enemies are going to come through voices, through noise, and everything. And he's very skilled at cutting people through left and right. So Donnie Yen's character, we can understand, is very, very inspired from this template. And because he's also a guy who is very affable, we can see him very able to crack jokes, right? We also see him sharing a history with John Wick. But as we see him in Osaka, he's a guy who is, continuously eating. He's a guy who's eating the soup. He's a guy who's eating the soup. Everywhere else, shootout and everything is going on, but he's busy eating the soup.
Finding his own corner.
Yeah, that is also Zatoichi reference. Zatoichi was
okay.
Yeah, that is also a Zatoichi reference. So he's eating the soup and everything, and then finally he comes, he uses his cane to marks out. He connects a couple of, sensors onto the walls. We don't understand what he's
first he checks
we don't understand what he's doing. And then we see him running. We see him running like some sort of, cartoon character. We are seeing him running. And then when the assassins are finally coming, as they walk, motion sensor, the sensors blink. He hears that voice and then he starts shooting them. And it's bloody brilliant.
Brilliant, yeah.
You see that and you are like, I see where you're going with this.
I mean, for me, if you're setting up your side characters, supporting characters just through the visual grammar of your film.
Yeah.
I mean, especially for an action film, right?
What else do you need? Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and of course the supporting cast itself, like however much archetypal they are, the supporting cast are too distinctive. Like Ian McShane's character, Winston. Yeah. What do you know about Winston except the cadence with which he talks to John Wick? Like Jonathan, Winston. Yeah, it's always that. But each and every time they talk with that cadence, McShane changes that cadence. It's always like it's angry. Sometimes it's angry. Sometimes it's betrayed. Sometimes it's, he's showing a form of paternal bond. It's always a paternal bond also within there.
I think both of them nail saying out very simple words, single words with two syllables.
Like Keanu is a master at that at this point.
Yeah.
The amount of time Keanu says yeah
and maybe.
Yeah and maybe. The only time that had so much emotion was in the first movie when he's angrily screaming, maybe I am back. And each and every subsequent time, they have chosen to make Keanu's, dialogue delivery even shorter.
Yeah.
It's like, there is literally I think an article in which he says that in 2 hours and 41 minutes runtime of a movie, Keanu
200 words.
Yeah, barely says 200 words.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is insane.
I doubt that. I doubt even that, man. And for me, I think even the director at this point realizes that his non-verbal communication in itself is the driving power behind a lot of action, right? Because as the audience, you know the lore behind both John Wick and Keanu Reeves, considering the huge cultural phenomenon that he's become since these films came out, right? And in a way, it did revitalize his career, right?
But this movie too, right? I know we will get back to what you're saying, but it's like this movie too. I think what makes this movie stand out from John Wick Chapter 2 and John Wick Chapter 3 for me is that even though the lore is interesting, I always felt that chapter 2 and chapter 3 focused too much on the lore. I felt that the
Definitely,
lore was the weakest angle.
Mm-hmm.
It always was the weakest angle.
Yeah.
I think they dialed the lore down significantly. Lore of the assassins, lore of the Continental.
Yeah.
They dialed that down significantly. The lore which is utilized here is John Wick's own past. His connection with Koji, the manager of the Osaka Continental, played by the great Hiroyuki Sanada. Amazing actor who made even Bullet Train look good. Just saying. Then the great Hiroyuki Sanada, who plays the manager of the Continental, Osaka Continental. So they share a connection, right? Keanu's John Wick and Sanada's Koji, and they express it within a couple of dialogues. It's all hinted at. The lore is always hinted at. Kane's relationship, Donnie Yen's Kane and Reeves's John Wick, that's another lore which is always hinted at. But those hinting at is what was great about John Wick 1 as well.
First, exactly.
John Wick 1 also hinted at the lore. That's all we needed. And I truly believe that the reason why John Wick 4 works so well is because they realize that we have set up the lore. We don't need to set it up anymore. Our world is ridiculous as it is. Our world is ridiculous as it is.
And when you say that the this film, the fourth one, holds back from a lot of lore building that the second and third films wholly dedicated themselves to, I actually would like to discuss, because for me, even this one is continuously expanding upon that methodology and the lore, but a lot of it is very skillfully cloaked by this very simple emotional dynamics that as you said, that it's already hinting at, right?
Yeah.
And I think I can give it best encapsulate itself with this one scene in the church, okay?
Yeah.
Where these two old friends supposedly sit together right next to each other, mild spoilers, before they are thrown into this scenario where they have to fight against each other, right? For their life. And I think it's those simpler scenes, but even those scenes are played with such a nuance and restraint that they work, right?
I think more than the restraint, it's the fact that it's how the treatment of the scene, right? Because the dialogues are very simple.
Definitely.
Dialogues are very simple. There's nothing in those dialogues, but it's the delivery and it's how the director chooses to frame them.
And how he chooses to frame that, and how he even considers on placing those events between these massive action set pieces,
yeah.
And I think that's where the film earns its runtime for me, because even when it's not doing those emotional moments, when it's not about those held back moments, I think it's just a sweeping epic that is soaking you in with all of its neon lighting and cinematography, right? Because it is, and for me, there's no other genre that I love other than neo-noir, right? And for me, this is as close to something that comes to a cyberpunk modern neo-noir, right?
The evoking of the neo-noir started with the John Wick
second film.
Chapter 1 still had that very edgy, grungy, Dhruv always says, like, kind of that Sundance kind of a feel of that, very, cloudy days and everything. It's all that stuff. Everything is darker. The neo-noir sensibility started from chapter 2. It, enveloped itself in chapter 3. In chapter 4, it is literally in full bloom. It is in full bloom. And it's like Dan Lauriston, the cinematographer, was given carte blanche. You shoot it any way you like. Tell me the last time you have seen a blockbuster look this beautiful.
It's fantastic. And, right from the opening sequence, it does not even make narrative logical sense for John Wick to be riding a horse in the middle of a desert. But the way that scene is established.
The first shot of the sunrise.
Oh my God.
Yeah. The sunrise happening, the three horsemen are coming, You think
oh my God,
me with my comic book adult brain, I'm thinking, oh, he's referencing the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Okay then. So you are seeing the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and then you realize, no, that's not the case. Three horsemen are running in front.
Oh God.
One horseman is actually shooting them.
And the
And you
fact that it doesn't even cut, okay, it
no,
just makes you wonder for a moment over there. And during that moment, I was so distracted because my brain instantly went, should I exit the screening and go watch this film on IMAX? Is it a mistake watching this in normal theater? And it's right from that moment, I knew that this movie is going to earn its 170-minute runtime. And it did. And I couldn't be happier.
it's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah,
And some of the match cuts in this movie, holy Jesus,
fantastic,
some of the
fantastic.
match cuts in this movie.
Even the needle drops for me, man,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
towards the
yeah.
end, yeah.
And it's like you think about it, Lawrence of Arabia is known for that famous match cut, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's known for the famous match cut. The light has been blown up,
Yeah.
and then we suddenly cut to the sunrise. It's kind of like the same thing, except the inverse happens here.
Mm.
So we look at that and we wonder, is it just me, or is Chad Stahelski, he's making the direct to video sequel and he's letting the stigma of the direct to video sequel action movies, he's trying single-handedly to remove the stigma of those
Mm.
because that's what it feels like. Because think about it for a second. You have in John Wick Chapter 3, the main villain, the main assassin villain of John Wick Chapter 3 is Mark Dacascos. Himself one of the protagonists of numerous direct to video action movies. We have Scott Atkins, ladies and gentlemen, one of the best martial artist actors ever.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen Accident Man, Hitman's Holiday, and if you are an action fan and if you haven't seen that movie, you need to watch that movie. That movie is bloody brilliant. We have Scott Atkins in a fat suit, in a purple suit, acting like he's the kingpin, talking in a ridiculous British accent, and we buy all of it, especially when you see in the middle of the discotheque, which is again neo-noir lighting and all of
Yeah,
it.
oh my God. The overhead top shot, right?
Yeah.
All those angles, yeah.
Yeah, and then you see Scott Atkins in that fat suit, looking like a version of the Kingpin from Daredevil. In that fat suit, he's drop kicking. He's shifting and he's drop kicking. You're like, what the hell am I watching? And then you realize you don't care. You are laughing in glee.
Yeah.
Because you haven't seen something this gorgeous in a while. You see how the discotheque is shot. And that's the clever thing here about all of these sequels, right? Because each and every sequel, we see the budget being raised higher and higher and higher. What Stahelski does is very simple. Stahelski's vision is simple. I'm going to make an action movie. So I'm going to show that my action and my stunt team is at par. And I'm not going to waste my time in special effects unless it is absolutely necessary.
Needed, yeah.
So where do I spend all the bigger budget in? The production design. All of these sequences are shot in location. All of these sequences, all of these production design is that entire discotheque within the waterfall and everything. It's ridiculous. That entire sequence, that production design and all of it, that discotheque shouldn't exist. It's ridiculous. People are dancing and in the middle, John Wick is killing folks and people are still dancing. It's ridiculous, but you don't care.
It's ridiculous, but at the same time, I think we talked about this when we were talking about discussing RRR, okay? That even in the middle of that absurd scene where he lets the tigers out, there's always a bunch of characters, even if it's a single character or a couple, reacting to those animals in the background, okay? Where they actually feel threatened by it. And it's the same over here.
Yeah.
Despite the massive location, okay, despite the massive nightclub scenario over here, there's always people you see in the background who are a bit scared and who are witnessing the action unfold. And for me, the great part about all these three main action scenes, I think there are 6 set pieces, if I'm not wrong, but these are like 3 main set pieces, okay?
Yeah.
In each
Overall, there are 6.
Yeah.
Connectively, overall there are 6, but in a larger umbrella there are 3 because those are 3 massive sequences.
Exactly.
Like the
And
last
when
40 minutes is
oh god,
40 minutes is a long action set piece.
yeah.
That's
And
how it is.
for me, even though it's been a day since I watched the film, and it's just very difficult for me to even shake off the memory of it, and it's also vividly clear in my head of how the entire scene proceeds, how a particular scene proceeded. When in reality, if you watch any action film these days, or any action film from any decade, right, it always get muffled after a point. How did these guys reach at this point? How is it? How did they end up over here? But over here, it's also in camera. It's also vividly placed that you follow the action through, and that's why
That's
this
what we
is
had been missing, right?
exactly.
We hadn't been witness as an
Mhm.
audience. We hadn't been close enough to feel engaged to the action,
Mhm.
right?
And there's this very logical thing that a lot of critics and filmmakers agree to, and that's what my biggest reservation had been for the majority of action films, despite my palpable love for the genre. That after a point, if you don't set up the emotional aspects and dexterity of your screenplay, of your on-screen characters, protagonist, really well, after a point, the action starts getting numb.
Yeah.
But John Wick series, especially with this part, it proves that no, it doesn't have to get numb unless you choose to shoot it that way, unless you
Like
choose to make it go numb,
yeah,
right?
if you choose to make it that good looking,
Yeah.
how can you be numb?
Yeah.
That's my whole. What does numbing actually entail?
Your eyes
Numbing,
being just,
yeah,
yeah,
and you're bored. After a
yeah,
point, you're just bored of the.
accustomed to the, yeah.
Yeah, you're just accustomed to it.
Mhm.
Like I can understand you being accustomed to Wick's moves, right?
Exactly.
But again, how Wick moves,
That's
how
why
he
the
loads
film,
the gun, how he
exactly.
loads the gun with the
Mhm.
speed, how he loads the gun. It's nonchalance, right? The
It's
gun.
nonchalance, and I think it also works because the film is very aware of these choices of these notions, and that's why it constantly is pitching him against characters and opponents of different
Yes,
body
exactly.
demographic, right?
Yes, exactly. And it's also like each and every single time there are little details you can spot, right?
Yeah.
Like in the third movie, I
Hmm.
remembered there is a catacombs action sequence in which he's reloading a shotgun. I have never seen someone show the effort of loading a shotgun look this cool. It's like
Hmm.
he's loading the shotgun. It's taking him effort, but even within the effort, it's making it look cool because it's how the camera is shot. He's sitting,
Hmm.
he's standing in the middle of the pillar, laying down the pillar. He's loading the gun. He points, shoots, loads the gun again, shoots at the back again, and then loads it again. And he's taking time doing it, and it's cool as hell.
Talking about how you frame the shootouts, you want to talk about that overhead sequence?
Oh yeah, let's go
Oh
there.
God!
Let's go
Oh
there.
my God!
Let's go there. So I'm going to reference
A video game?
a
Yeah.
video game called Hotline Miami.
Yeah.
Hotline Miami is basically what if Grand Theft Auto Vice City was shot in top-down mode.
Yeah.
The camera angle which you see in John Wick, in that sequence within, it was a church, right? No, what was that?
No,
What was
no,
that?
no.
It
This
was
is
a
stairwell or something like
yeah.
that.
It was like a shovel.
Abandoned house
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something.
It was the
Yeah.
Sacré-Cœur. It was a shovel like kind of a situation. So
Mm-hmm.
within that, inside that house, that entire top-handed sequence,
Hmm.
that is the framework which had been used by many video games before first-person shooter was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when GTA came out, Grand Theft Auto came out, the first Grand Theft Auto games were always made like this.
Yeah.
The top-down
Until
action
the
sequence.
second one, I guess.
Until the third. The third was the first,
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, yeah.
the third.
Yeah. Liberty.
GTA 1 and 2 were all,
Okay.
top down.
Okay.
From 3, then Vice City, then San Andreas.
Mm-hmm.
All of those were, the first person shoot, third person
Okay.
shooter games. So, and then the most famous of them all was Hotline Miami, because Hotline Miami was violent as hell. Okay. And it was also very hard. You had to, top down action sequence, you have to wait. You have to wait for your enemies to come. Then you have to shoot. All of this done in top down sequence. And also there is another game which Stahelski also references, which I have noticed, is a 2019 game called Hong Kong Massacre. Stahelski references that himself in one of his interviews, that he was very inspired by Hong Kong Massacre. Which, when I saw some of the gameplay of Hong Kong Massacre, I can realize, yeah, this is very Hotline Miami inspired, and I can also understand why he would be inspired by this. But of course, the fact that he's using the top-down sequence, and we are seeing John Wick, take one of those flamethrowers and shoot the guy. That felt so much
flamethrower / shotgun. I don't know, but whatever it is.
That felt so much like a video game in which one of your players finally gets one of the big guns, one of those power-ups, and then now you're going to shoot them through. And it felt like a level, except it's visceral and it's cool. That's literally what it is. It's cool. This is one of the coolest shots I've seen in a while. And to be honest with you, I can understand why people are raving about their staircase scene. And while the staircase scene I can understand because it is comedy gold, because after fighting so many people at the top, he's finally thrown back. And the thrown back is done so well because he's been thrown back continuously.
I don't think it was done well, by the way. That was my only. It was probably because this group of guys sitting right behind me.
One of them, you heard them.
One of them was like, "Ye kya Salman Khan ki movie ki tarah hai?" Something like that.
So I'll get to that. So now the thing is, he's being thrown back. He falls down. The comedy is he falls down. Finally, he has to get back up. Now, if people are wondering why this cartoon-like sequence throughout, in John Wick, I think chapter 2 and chapter 3, every time the movie opens, there is always, and I don't know if you noticed this, Aryan, there is always a video, a projection or a video within a building or say a billboard of Buster Keaton. There is always. You rewatch John Wick 2 again and rewatch John Wick 3 again. There is always a Buster Keaton scene. There is always a Buster Keaton homage. Now, why Buster Keaton? He was one of the greatest physical comedian and stuntmen alive. If you have seen any of the Buster Keaton shots, you will understand what I'm talking about, because each of the things he does, you need to realize those were shot in the 1920s and the 1930s. All of those slapstick comedy, all of those physical stunts he's doing, all of those are done by him. That is insane. And I genuinely think because of it, and because Keanu as a person is like, I can understand as an actor, he has his limitations, but as a physical actor, he's great, right?
Definitely. That's why he was so good at comedies, right?
As a physical actor, he's great. So the perspective here is, for John Wick, Keanu can bring a sort of melancholy within that brooding visage of his. So, but he's also adept at doing all these physical action sequences. I think the Buster Keaton comparison sounds apt, because if you see a Buster Keaton shot, you will always see Buster Keaton having that same deadpan expression while he's doing each and every single one of those stunts he's doing. Kind of mirrors very, perfectly with what is happening with John Wick. Because he's getting tired. Like Reeves is Wick is always getting tired and everything. But each and every time after he's getting tired, he wakes up, he gets up, he sighs, and then he has the same melancholic brooding face, and then he just goes on to get the next enemy, And it feels very much like a Buster Keaton scene. So when he's falling down from the stairwell, it felt like a mixture of, a Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner kind of a cartoon, and also something Buster Keaton would do. So I was like, this is apt. This feels very much on point. So it didn't actually bother me that much at all. And but I can understand why. Because at some point, I think I would have loved it better if it was an entirely one take kind of a thing, like the camera is continuously following him, falling back.
Because because otherwise it just I don't want to say this, but otherwise it gives a very Indian melodrama kind of a vibe, right? TV serial kind of.
But other than that, I think
it happens twice, right?
It happens twice. Another thing which happens thrice or four times to the point that it is patently ridiculous is how many times Wick gets hit by cars. To
Oh
the
yeah.
extent I'm like, even armors can't hold that much weight, man. I am sorry. How many armor platings you do? You can't hold that much weight. But after that point, you realize that this is kind of like the final boss. So
Mm.
this is kind of like the final level of the moment. And
Yeah.
you realize until a point that you get it. And
Mm.
because Keanu's John Wick is because his emotion is so guarded,
Mm.
and because Keanu is kind of bringing his own self into the movie, we still buy him getting
Mm.
tired, getting angry, getting so exhausted at all of it.
Mm.
Because this entire movie is also about exhaustion in a way. Because it's
Yeah.
like this is
He's
kind of,
exhausted of being in the game, right?
yeah,
He just wants
all
his
the
freedom.
other characters too, like Winston himself, he's also exhausted of being under the high table, all these rules, all these
Mm.
regulations. We see him getting exhausted by it all. He doesn't give two shits.
Yeah.
And his exhaustion is translating to his irritation with, Bill Skarsgård's character, Marky the Grumman.
Mm.
Again, great performance. He knows
Yeah.
exactly what film he's in.
Yeah.
He knows exactly what film he's in, and he's doing a bang up job.
Apparently, it was his own decision to choose this character of playing the main villain in the John
Hmm.
Wick film. He was offered a choice by the director, and he chose this character.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, interesting.
Yeah, and he feels completely right in that world, right? Because
Yeah.
he's that arrogant. He joins the long line of villains in the John Wick universe of the arrogant douchebag.
Yeah.
Arrogant douchebag guys.
And for me, I think he also balanced that obviously 60s, 70s era Bond-esque villain
Yeah,
vibe,
yeah,
but he also had this subtle vulnerability about him that he also acknowledged, and he himself knew that he's very replaceable, right?
yeah,
That he'll
yeah.
just be replaced by someone else, and that's when you see that panic take over him
But
by
it's
the end of
also
the film.
such an anime inspired thing, right? Because his villain is literally saying in one of the sequences that
Hmm.
this campaign is not about John Wick. This campaign is about removing the idea of John Wick. And I'm like, I am with you. Hook, line, and sinker. I'm completely in.
It's great, yeah.
So you
And
do realize we acknowledge that this movie is ridiculous, but at
yeah,
the same time, you can't disregard the fact that this movie is also almost like a work of art. And
definitely.
in a way, it's like Dan Lauriston, the cinematographer, is
Hmm.
very much should be given credit for, along with the stunt team,
Hmm.
because you can shoot action scenes all live long day. All these direct to video sequels shoot great action sequences and everything. Action sequences can look good by how you frame the camera and how all of it. Tell me one of these action sequences which looks this good, which with this amount of light exposure,
Hmm.
with this amount of use of primary colors. You remember that sequence in the Osaka Continental in which John Wick is standing in front of those, red flowers, red flower tree.
Yeah.
That shot is so gorgeous. I was flabbergasted.
It's fantastic.
I'm like,
Yeah.
what movie am I watching here? What am I seeing
And
here?
that's the thing, right? It's about constantly paying homage to the point that it's almost like ripping off, but
Yeah,
you do it with such grace that
finesse. It's finesse. Yeah.
it never gets condescending to the audience, and
No.
it's done with such heftness, with such deftness that it you constantly admire what's unrolling in front of your
And
eyes, right?
what makes John Wick 4 so loved by the audiences?
Mm.
There is a sincerity in this movie.
Exactly, yeah.
There is a sincerity within all of these actors. They know exactly what movie
The
they're in.
kind of film there, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
but there is a sincerity there.
Mm.
That sincerity which has been missing from a lot of American blockbusters, and
Mm.
people don't want eye winking, joke jokey type of movies anymore.
Mm.
They don't. They want sincerity in these movies. That's what they want. They don't want to be condescended. They want a movie in which the characters know what world they are in, and the
Mm.
characters are interacting in congruency with the world that they are in. That's how it is. And by this time, this is the fourth movie in the franchise. If you still aren't
Yeah,
buying into this world, you won't be able to buy into this world anymore.
definitely. And you, while watching the entire sequence in Paris, while he's just drifting his car and killing
Oh
off
yeah,
folks without without even a door on his car, I
yeah,
was just thinking of Dom Toretto's reaction
yeah,
of making 10 Fast and Furious films and yet being beaten by a guy
yeah,
when it
yeah.
comes to drifting
And
at
this is
least.
why, this is why Fast and Furious can use all of that money,
Yeah,
all of that CG, all of the
into space.
all of the family melodrama, all of none of it will hold a candle to what this franchise has done. I'm telling you.
And do you know for me what the most fascinating part is? You mentioned about Protocol being of coming out in 2011, three,
Hmm.
4 years before the first John Wick film. We talked about what other action film? I think
Skyfall.
Skyfall, yeah, obviously, and another film that kind of revitalized another franchise from the early 2000s, Fast Five. Okay,
Fast
it
5,
came
yeah.
out in the same year, 2011,
2011.
and people were like, "Oh my God, is this the revitalization of the Fast and Furious franchise?" And
To a certain extent, it
apparently,
was.
it's my favorite film easily by far in the franchise. But now, sitting over here in 2023, you look at how
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's all panned out. And that's when you realize that it's okay to build a franchise out of, oh, first, wholly original ideas, wholly original metal worlds that's not actually based upon some already established IP. As long as you, as you talked about it, as long as you do it with respect, right? As long as
Conviction and
there's
the
and
sincerity.
conviction, yeah, exactly. And for me, it's just I'm so glad that the film is doing well. But again, right when the film ended, I instantly had one thought and one doubt that how this film is going to age, for me at least, is going to be wholly dependent on what the makers choose now going ahead. And for me, spoilers for anyone who's listening, but for me, the statements that the production team, Lionsgate, and the director made today, just this evening on Tuesday, and they're like, hey, we don't have any intention of ditching this franchise or saying goodbye to Kiara. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What? So for me, that's
Your
the,
ending is perfect at this
yeah.
point. If you are
And
going
it's
to
perfect because it even comes with a promise that it indirectly looking back, it warrants this 3 hour runtime of the film, right?
Hmm, hmm,
Because you see it as an epic that's leading to a conclusion that's going to
yes.
end this emotional arc that started in the first film,
Hmm,
that went on for a couple of weeks, and now here's this ending. Okay, but now if you're
yeah.
and you know the thing that
Now what else are you going to do? Now you're going
and
to introduce
see,
zombies into this mix.
I'm more than happy to listen about all these spin-off with Another Armas and all these other exciting possibilities.
I'm not interested though, honestly. I'll tell you why. Because
Hmm.
I'm not interested because
It
I
won't
think
have the same
it won't
creators.
have the same. I
Yeah.
think Chad Stahelski, and this entire stunt team, they
Hmm.
had a singular vision. I think
Definitely, yeah. It's very distinctive. That's why
I'm
it's.
completely in tune with that vision. I
Yeah.
am still under doubt as to
Hmm.
how much Ballerina, the Ana de Armas spin-off, will have that
Hmm.
same vision intact. And
Definitely.
it's also as Len Wiseman, who as a director, I'm not too much of a fan of.
Hmm.
And then we have the spin-off TV series, which is apparently the Continental TV series.
Yeah.
So it is going to be about the lore. Again, one of the weaker aspects of the entire John Wick series has
Abo-
been the lore.
yeah, I definitely one of the weaker aspects, but apart from that, I think it just contradicts and goes against what we talked about of how what makes this franchise so good in the first place, of that unknown factor, okay, of not knowing everything, of
Yes.
not knowing what the history of John Wick was, of not knowing how his life was before he married, before he fell in love with this girl who eventually ended up dying, okay, before he got his dog killed.
We don't
And
need every gaps to be filled.
exactly. And that's what made this franchise, that's what made John Wick's story so rich. And now, if you're going to tell me that, oh, no, he's actually dead, but here's two prequels that we're going to give you.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you kidding me?
Don't
You
do that.
built
Don't
this
do that.
franchise on the promise of creating this wholly original lore and concept, and it's great seeing it earn so much money. Okay. But then if you want to fall in the same place, and it's just so tiring, man. I wouldn't be surprised again. I would still probably end up watching those films on its on opening
Yeah,
weekends.
but
But
again,
still, it's like,
it's the same thing with which happens with comic books in a way.
yeah.
It's like main characters die all the time. Death is a
Hmm.
joke in comic books, okay.
Hmm.
But more often than not, some of the stories in which those main characters die, they become famous either because
Hmm.
of the sheer shock value
Hmm.
of seeing these main characters die,
Hmm.
or because the story itself is so strong.
Hmm.
I don't know how many people have read this comic. I will urge people to check it out.
Hmm.
The Death of Wolverine.
Hmm.
And yes, Wolverine, I mean the X-Men comic character Wolverine.
Okay.
The Death of Wolverine by Charles Soule, art by Steve McNiven.
Hmm.
All you need to know before starting The Death of Wolverine is his healing factor, which makes him, almost immortal. That's gone.
Okay.
His healing factor is gone. That's the
Hmm.
only thing you need to know.
Hmm.
He is sick. He's sick and his healing factor is gone. The entire story is one long chase sequence for Wolverine to finally find out about his origin, finally square off something about his origin, and spoilers alert because it's the name of the comic, he finally dies.
Hmm.
But it's such well written
Hmm.
that the impact still hits you.
Hmm.
It always hits you. How he dies, I'm not going to spoil how he dies. It's a
Hmm.
bloody brilliant image on how he dies. It's very poetic and it's also bloody brilliant image. So
Hmm.
that's what happens, right? This story, if it ends now, and please, for the love of God, let it end. Because sometimes endings are good.
Yeah.
MCU endings are good. I'm just saying, you would have tried it after Endgame, taken a year off. So if the ending is good, because John Wick Chapter 4 ends so well,
Hmm.
just let it be, right? Just
Yeah.
make it what it is. Because I had a crazy thought. It's like, I think even I don't remember who wrote this. I think Rahul Desai wrote this. Rahul Desai wrote about John Wick as Wick's story about a closure of grief.
Okay.
Which makes sense in a way. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, because that's the entire emotional through line
Hmm.
of his closure through grief.
Hmm.
I chose to think the entire John Wick story. It's a video game, but
Hmm.
it's also like, him walking through Dante's Inferno.
Okay.
He's walking through the seven depths of hell each and every single time.
Okay. Hmm.
Because he is going through hell, he's going through revenge. And each and every time he's going through revenge, he's going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the seventh and the last depth circle of hell. Each and every
Hmm.
single time. And each and every single time, each and every circle he's entering, he's visited by newer monsters.
Hmm.
And he's
For
efficient. And he's
for
efficient at it, but he's always getting pulled in, right? He can't
okay.
get out. He can't,
Exactly.
yeah.
And this entire story, this entire film relies on this motivation of him wanting a get out, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
after having that, if I mean, for me, what worked and what I have, how I have looked at this entire franchise is basically John Wick projecting his own grief in the only way he knows he can.
Exactly.
Okay,
Violence.
and he
Grief projected through violence.
exactly, and you see that he doesn't like it. He doesn't feel comfortable with it,
No.
and that also reflects and becomes a good shielding excuse for the lack of dialogue, for the lack of verbatim. Okay,
Yeah.
and
And
at
John
the
Wick 4
same.
also asks that question. What makes John Wick 4 so good is
Mhm.
because it asks that question. Winston literally asks John Wick that question. And
Mhm.
then what?
Yeah.
It ends with death, okay? If it
Yeah.
ends with death, they will replace it very easily, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like the head of a hydra. You
Hmm.
can run out of bullets, they will not run out of figures.
And
Figureheads.
his entire comeback to his question is like the same reason why you do it, revenge, right?
Yeah,
And that's where the scene ends.
yeah. That's what the
Yeah.
scene ends.
Yeah.
The entire
And
reason why you do
for me, his entire purpose, his entire arc of dealing with this grief, this weight, it comes to its poetic fruition when he indirectly or directly saves the life of someone else's son.
it. Yeah,
Okay. By making this choice of taking a bullet to himself. And
yeah.
for me, that entire scene where he falls apparently, supposedly to his death
Hmm.
on the stairs while the sun is rising,
Hmm.
I think it's it's the most beautiful thing ever that
Yeah,
I have seen in an
you
action
can't
film.
end it. You can't end it in any other way. And
Exactly. Yeah.
that's what it is, right? It's
Mm.
escalation. It's escalation. Each and every movie is escalation. How long can
Mm.
escalation go?
Yeah.
How
It
escalation
has to
always
meet its
reaches it.
crescendo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Mm.
always has to reach its crescendo.
Mm.
There should be an end point. This is the
Mm.
perfect end point. Just
Yeah.
end it, guys. Just
Yeah.
end it. We are happy, man. We will follow you anywhere. Honestly, Chad Stahelski is making a Ghost of Tsushima adaptation. At this
Okay.
point,
Yeah, I saw this. Yeah.
Stahelski, you can do whatever action movie you want, man. I'm all in. I'm serious. You take your entire stunt team and do whatever the hell you want. We don't care. We are going to watch it. Heaven and hell. Yeah.
And for me, it would be very fascinating. Again, it's obviously not what I would want as an action fan lover, but for me, it would be very exciting and fascinating to see the ballerina adaptation fail without the creators being attached to, without the
That would almost be like, it would be such an obvious thing, but it would almost be like, yeah, but it would almost also be like, yeah, maybe lightning does strike just
yeah,
once.
yeah.
Maybe, yeah, maybe that's what it is. Because
Mm,
the Mission Impossible movies,
mm.
some would say they got vitalized after three. I would say they got
Four.
revitalized after four.
Yeah, definitely four.
It got revitalized after four, but it
Mm,
reached its zenith by five, right? And then
yeah,
five, six, seven, I will argue that
yeah,
is just hitting the high marks each and every single time. And it's like that is also an art form.
definitely. Yeah.
That is also an art form. And
Mm,
that's what it has always been. So at this point, and that is why Tom Cruise and Christopher McQuarrie are still in that partnership in Mission Impossible, because they are a winning team. And that
definitely.
is why Mission Impossible is going to end with the two of them at the helm, because again,
Mm,
Tom Cruise is smart.
yeah, he knows what
Escalation.
legacy to leave behind,
Yeah,
right?
escalation. How long can escalation go?
Yeah,
Because at the end of the day, we can enjoy watching Tom Cruise, jump from bikes through the Niagara Falls or whatever the hell he wants to do, you know. But after a point, even Tom Cruise is like, I can understand, but still, man,
yeah.
how long can I go on?
I
And
mean,
yeah,
I wonder if there's going to be a time when his age would actually show, but
it
it's
is
still
showing
stopping.
now. I think it is starting to show now at this point.
Yeah, I think in his recent interviews
Yeah,
around
yeah,
the
yeah,
Oscars, yeah.
yeah. And it's also like, but I think the larger question now is, by
Hmm.
John Wick, after watching John Wick, can we expect a resurgence?
Hmm.
Can we expect a resurgence in action movies or in more original movies in a way? I
I
think
mean, I've already come across multiple renowned pieces from renowned publications calling this the best action film in decades and calling it
in decades
the
maybe, yeah. But
yeah.
I think considering the fact that Mission Impossible is still a thing, I think it's comparable.
I think the only comparisons that a lot of critics have made is Mad Max Fury Road.
I am going to completely agree with them on
Yeah,
that. I
yeah.
genuinely think this is like the Mad Max Fury roadification of this
Of
franchise
Neo Noir.
in noir.
Yeah,
I genuinely think so, because
definitely.
this is, I mean, I haven't rewatched Mad Max Fury Road in a while, but I'm
Mm.
sure that if I rewatch it again, I will love it, because that is another movie which is all
Mm.
practical,
Yeah.
and it is George Miller's way, manic style, speeding up the camera and all that stuff.
Mm.
But is it what I also loved is the fact that Stahelski, he doesn't like to cut.
Yeah.
He likes to luxuriate on the
Mhm.
action. And
Yeah.
that's what makes you enjoy it, because he's letting the audience engage with the visceral violence and all the
Mhm.
it's almost like a dance in a way. It's like a ballet dance, it's going around in every single frame.
You know that entire scene after uh, during the first exchange,
Hmm.
after he just stops,
Hmm.
letting him pretend that he's there. Okay,
Oh
this
yeah,
which character? I forgot his name.
Kane.
Kane, yeah.
Yeah,
When he lets him assume that he's dead, and
yeah,
then it's so good, right? It's so good, and again, it's those moments, even amidst big action sequences, that lets those little nuanced character moments seep in, right?
yeah. It's
And
that's the entire thing, right? It's
mm,
physical acting. It's
yeah,
it's letting nuance not through dialogue, but through
mm,
character movements, character motivations, and all that. You might like those, you
mm,
might not like those, but you can't
mm.
deny that those are storytelling tactics which are being used. If they're done
Especially in
well,
noir.
if they are done well, if they're
Mm,
done well, they work
mm,
90% of it,
mm, mm,
and it worked here. So I can understand why many people might not like it.
mm.
I completely get you. I can understand why many people would be exhausted by it. I get it. I get it also. I still think that you shouldn't be exhausted by it. But
Yeah,
I get it why. I get
yeah,
why.
yeah, definitely.
It doesn't change the fact that this is a movie which is literally making action movies into works of art. And how many times
Mm.
can you say that about a genre? It's a fine tuning a genre to literal perfection.
I think this is going to age so well
This is going
going
to
down the
age
line. It's going to age
fantastically.
fantastically, right? And for me, I just can't wait until it comes out in quote unquote digital to show in the good, the bad, and the ugly soundtrack during the last duel.
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
It's so good. Or
oh
any
yeah,
any more Kuni soundtrack for that matter.
yeah. The entire soundtrack also.
Yeah.
The
I
entire
mean, I
sound.
was listening to the soundtrack. Apparently, soundtrack for this film, it's like 1 hour 27 minutes long. And
Yeah,
I'm like, this is what I'm doing
it's
now.
very synth. It's very
Yeah,
synth heavy. It's very
yeah,
it's very EDM heavy. It's very synth heavy. Which
yeah.
again, the progression of the soundtrack also very smart, right? Like
Exactly, exactly. That's what I noticed when I was listening to the entire soundtrack, that even the soundtrack has like layers, okay?
yeah.
Even the soundtrack is escalating to a
It's
certain
escalating.
crescendo, yeah.
Your crescendo, yeah.
And it's again for me, it's this film stands as a testament to how good action can work, can sprout out of good vision of creating these healthy dynamics on set. I mean, for me, I was listening to one of the interviews of the director, and he was talking about how he personally takes care of the stunt team behind the camera and how he addresses and makes sure that all these safety measures are always followed.
Hmm.
And you listen to him, and that's when you realize that this is coming from a guy who's been there, who has been a action stunt coordinator, right?
Third coordinator, yeah.
Yeah, who's seen it all and who knows the consequences of going a step wrong.
Yeah.
And everything is so meticulous when you watch this film. I think I just cannot wait to rewatch this despite its 3 hour long runtime. And I genuinely doubt,
Honestly, I don't think I even noticed. To be very
yeah,
frank with you, I don't
yeah,
think I noticed it at
definitely.
all. Because again, it's like I said, you will notice it. Your eyes will become numb when you will be bored. How can you
Yeah,
be bored when a movie looks this good?
that's good. Yeah. And for me, again, my love for especially cyberpunk neo noir, this is my
Yes.
thing. This is my thing. I want to play this film on my wall, all around my room, all day. This is what I want to live in. This and play it in a 2049 side by side.
Yeah.
I can stay in that room forever.
Which again, Dan Lauriston is the protege of Roger Deakins, so it makes sense.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
It
Okay.
actually makes sense, yeah.
Okay, wow. But you see all of those primary colors being very
Oh
much
yeah.
enhanced. That scene, that very subtle and quiet scene in the subway,
Oh yeah.
of
Oh
the of
wow.
his daughter and
Yeah,
John
yeah,
Wick
yeah, yeah, yeah.
standing
Yeah.
and sitting as a opposite.
Of course, you're like that train is very cinematic.
Yeah.
But it's still a subway train. Subway trains don't look this good. But okay. It's
So,
like I understand it's
and
Japan, but
the
still.
the fact that the filmmaker, that the camera just decides to just stay with these two characters, dealing
Yeah.
with that grief, that sigh, that you're sighing along with these characters. You know what you have just witnessed, and even though you have no idea about what that character was, what that character had been through, you know instantly knew what he stood for.
It's
And
primary.
because
It's primary emotions, right? It's
exactly,
it's primal emotions which you can relate to anyway. It's loss of
and
a
and
it's
it's
loss of a parent. It's revenge.
and it's precisely these kind of primary emotions that elevate action genre to another level, right?
Yeah,
And
it's more than not even that. It's like,
Hmm,
you can watch an action movie, be continuously balls to the wall action,
yeah.
always continuously. But after a point, you will become bored.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
But if you take a moment to breathe, and if you
Yeah.
take a moment to acknowledge the emotions
While making a subway look this good.
while making a subway look this good,
Yeah.
that's all it takes, honestly. Sometimes less is more. Again, sometimes less is more. Sometimes simplicity is a virtue. In this case, simplicity is a virtue. However
Yeah.
long the runtime is, simplicity works.
I mean, I was already very high on this film, but if I come to know that tomorrow they deal with the aspect of making a sequel in a particular way that doesn't disrespect or water down the achievements of this film, the emotional arcs of John Wick's character, then I would have no problem in going even higher with my rating in the future upon subsequent rewatches. And man, I cannot wait to
I
watch
I I again
this
again
again.
I,
Yeah.
I think this is my favorite of the franchise, bar none.
Definitely, yeah,
This is my
definitely.
favorite of the franchise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I will be a tad bit hesitant on seeing a sequel if it is announced. But if I learn from word of mouth and everything else that the movie actually is good and it is trying to
I mean, it's
maintain
going
respect,
to be good, right?
it's
It's
going to be
obviously
good. But
going to
whether
be
it
good,
can
but
justify its existence, that's the bigger
Mhm.
question.
Mhm.
Don't dilute the story. That's all I'm asking. That's
Yeah.
literally all I'm asking. Anyway, I
Anyway,
think that's a pretty, you know,
and then
impromptu
apparently
conversation.
it feels so good that this film, I vividly remember John Wick Part 3 not releasing in my city back in 2019. And I was like shocked because all the cities close to me, close to where I live, had like 3, 5, 10
Yeah,
shows of it playing around. And I went for a 11:15 p.m. show for this film in a not so crowded lively area of my town,
yeah,
of my city, right? And it had like 60% occupancy. And I was
yeah.
like, are you kidding me? Oh my God.
Yeah,
And
because
today the numbers came in and it made like 33 crores in like the first 3, 4 days.
the audience is there, right? That's what they
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
And this is the perfect time because this is the moment, right? Because
Mm,
all these
Pathan.
all these superhero movies, yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
understand we don't want to compare Pathan with John
No,
Wick,
no,
but
I'm just saying that because people in India especially might be in that
they want, yeah,
action,
yeah, they want action
adrenaline
movies,
rush, right? Yeah.
which is also the reason why Bhola might actually earn good money.
Yeah,
Honestly,
it will earn good money.
it will earn good money.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, there is an audience for that, and I think studios need to realize that, because
Yeah.
we are seeing all these big franchises like the MCU, the DC franchises, all of these are landing with a third.
Yeah. Yeah.
People are not connecting with it for various
Mm,
reasons. We are not
mm.
getting into those.
For various obvious reasons.
Various obvious reasons, but
Yeah.
we are not getting into those. But
Yeah.
honestly, I think John Wick Chapter 4 should be a wake up call.
Definitely. Yeah.
Should be a wake up call to
Mm-hmm.
everybody, to the studios and also to the awarding bodies as well.
Yeah.
Give
To consider.
give an award, make an award for the stunt team. For
Yeah. Oh
effing
my
sake,
God.
come
Yeah.
on, man. Come
Yeah.
on, man. Just, just do it anyway.
So exactly, and I just cannot wait to watch the next Mission Impossible film and see how differently it stands in front of this film, despite being from the same genres, but dealing with completely different
Completely
stakes.
different stakes, yeah.
Yeah.
Completely different stakes, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Anyway, yeah. I think that's for an impromptu conversation that went pretty wrong, but I think I had to talk about this. But yeah,
definitely. And I think these kinds of films warrant such impromptu conversations because of the adrenaline rush that
yeah,
we
yeah.
wouldn't want to wear off.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want our mind to just settle down and all that stuff because after a point, Hey, it's fine. Just
Exactly.
put it all out anyway.
I mean, it's been a day since I watched it, and I am telling you, this is my adrenaline rush. It still hasn't
Yeah,
gone down. So, all of you guys who's listening, just go watch John Wick Chapter 4, and if you have already watched it, go watch it again because I'm sure you didn't feel the runtime. That's how well
for
paced
action
the
movie,
film is.
I'm sure for action movie fans they did not feel that.
Yeah.
I'm extremely sure. Yeah.
Anyway, you can follow Amartya on. Can you
Amartya
please fill in? I'm
25.
not used to this.
Yeah, Amartya 25 on Instagram. And follow me on my letterbox.
Okay.
Most of the shit I do on letterbox anyway, all the writing and everything more or less. And I also write for High on Films and other websites if they permit me to write. So
Great, great. Tell them about the list that you made recently on Game of Thrones.
yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a impromptu decision again. Making a list of 10 TV shows like Game of Thrones. I know, pretty obvious. I don't think. I think there are a couple of choices you would like.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah,
so I will urge you to check them out.
definitely,
I'll urge
yeah.
you to check. I'm also trying to make a list on film noirs which have runtime less than 90 minutes, which
Mm-hmm.
is a pretty interesting list for people who are hard on time and who want quick bite movies with bursts of action and emotion and everything in between. I
But
think
then again, there would also be people who would come asking where to stream,
yeah.
where
No,
to
but then
stream.
again, all those movies are already available online because most of those are in
Okay.
public domain, so it's fine.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
unusual, but okay.
Yeah, because noirs, like classic noirs, they're already available, most of them online anyway, so it's fine.
Okay, cool,
Yeah,
cool. You
so
can follow Queen is Dead on their Spotify, and yeah, do share the episode if you like the film, if you like hearing us talk about the film, and you can follow me if you want on Aryan Talks Film. That's my Instagram handle as well as my letterbox. Thank you, Khatam. I
yeah,
guess yeah.
khatam. Yeah, khatam.
I'll just wait for a while to
Hmm.
let it sink. Then I have to
Close it
fucking
now.
watch and review.
Close it now.
पगला गए हो क्या शरीर के साथ साथ बुद्धि भी छोटा हो गया